kind of moving around. Obviously, everybody's aware of the pandemic and COVID, etc., so we won't go on to that too much. But yeah, happy to be getting this session in today. And today we're joined by, as I said, so Greg from MuleSoft, and he'll introduce himself in a short while as well. But we've got a good agenda, and which is firstly going to cover off everything around new features in MUnit, which hopefully a lot of people are aware of and hopefully using. So the updates I think will be of real interest. So like I say, so Greg is going to take us through that, and then after that we're also going to go through what's been a topic which has come up actually a number of times. So back last year in our meetups in Singapore, there's been one that's been raised a few times, which is really around building a business case around integration and API development, I guess, in general. And also, I guess part of that, and we'll come into it in part of the discussion in doing so, is how really to, I guess, engage the business. Okay. And it's at times as technical folk, and I'm not sure the background of everybody, but I know from personal experience, having come from a development background, you know, sometimes it's difficult to talk a business language and make sure that you know, business leads, etc., aren't kind of looking quizzically at you. So we're going to go through some of this, and Greg is going to lead it through, and we'll have a bit of a conversation around that. I'm also going to come up with a quiz, and we'll probably think around how we're going to work that on today's session. Sorry, and then also just we'll add in a few things around some news and updates from around the MuleSoft community, let's say. So probably just before we move on, maybe just a little kind of meeting etiquette, given we are on first time on doing this virtual meetup. So probably let's see how it goes, and hopefully please keep an open mind and we go well. But please bear with us if there's any issues. Number one, if people can just keep their microphones on mute, that would be useful. But if you do want to ask a question, please just ping in the chat box, and for sure we'll either pass the microphone to you, or you can raise the question in typing format. We'll try and keep this as not a monologue of myself and Greg presenting and talking to everybody. So it'd be useful to get some interaction, but also just conscious of numbers on the line. Okay, all right. So probably without further ado, Greg, should we move on?
We should indeed.
Yeah.
You want to just introduce yourself there again?
Yeah, so I guess just for myself, and I think there's quite a few new faces and names on the list. So for those who don't know me, so I'm the managing director of White Sky Labs here in Singapore. We set up last year, and White Sky Labs, and working closely with MuleSoft across Asia Pac, and delivering into a number of brilliant clients in region. I guess partly news on my side is that actually White Sky Labs has been recently acquired by Capgemini. So so we are now part of Capgemini and their new MuleSoft practice. Okay, so that's all exciting news for ourselves and also everyone involved. And so yeah, look, I mean, I think what we've, the building the community, I'm very passionate about, and hopefully if anybody does have any questions, please do reach out to me. Again, I apologize. It's kind of it's taken 5 months to get us to this the first meetup in Singapore and in this region, but hopefully we'll be progressing, whether physically or virtually, with some more sessions during the coming months. Okay, that's probably enough from myself. But like I say, good to meet all of those who are joining us, not just from Singapore, but also across the various other countries. I'm sure there's a few people from different countries joining us today. Over to you, Greg.
Yeah, well, just thanks, Julian, and just reiterating your comments about it's great to see so many people come online. Of course, we're all coping with. I have my own special story about coping with COVID, and that is that normally based in Singapore, but was outside of Singapore on a work trip at the time when the borders closed, and so consequently, I'm stuck down in the cold in Australia, and I'm looking forward to actually getting back to some warmer weather. But I've been with MuleSoft for nearly 4 years now. But I've been in and around integration and core systems for over 25 years now, and my particular interest has always been about how business interacts with integration and with IT, not just the technology, not just from a technical standpoint. And I think that's part of what I wanted to share with you today, particularly when it comes to a topic like MUnit and unit testing, is that it's to put it in that context, to actually say, once again, why is it important? I've just come off a particular job where we've done a whole review, and we actually found that one of our customers in region was actually not utilizing MUnit for what it was there for. And so it's worthwhile to go over again as a topic to say what's it there for, and what's good about it. So without further ado, let me go into that particular topic, and cover what's coming in the new version of MUnit and the new enhancements that we have around that. Fundamentally, it is about making easier unit testing within Mule. We're going to do 3 things when we look at this. Have a quick overview of MUnit. If you've not used MUnit before, that hopefully will put it in context for you. I imagine most of you on this call have had some experience with it. But then to actually talk about what's new in MUnit, and that's the new test recorder that's coming in Mule in the new 4.3 Studio 7.5 release. And then, of course, the resources and things that are going to be available for you going forward. So with that, let's have a look at the overview of MUnit. As I said, if you haven't been involved with MUnit before, it is specifically the testing framework that we use for testing the Mule applications that we build. So when we build an application, we go through the whole process of making sure that all the flows and everything are in place, that it reflects the API contract that we've downloaded, and then we want to make sure that we've got test cases built against those flows, so that we know that we have the basis for automated testing when we go into the whole CI/CD automation process. So what you see is that you start to focus on how well we are covering the actual API and the actual functionality that we've built into the API with the unit tests that we're building in there. So ultimately, MUnit is all about helping us deliver quality code and meet the required code coverage guidelines set up by our organizations, because we don't want to put in sloppy code into production. We want to make sure that we've got the automated tests in place. So MUnit is really there as a tool to help you do that. And in the very first sense, how do you use MUnit? Well, the MUnit flows are basically what we build in MUnit is a series of flows, similar to how we build the standard Mule flows. We, of course, call them test flows, or I think the common vernacular for that is a test suite. But they run various tests against the processes of your corresponding Mule flow. You can use pre-configured components for common actions like mocking operations and things within that. But ultimately, what you're looking to do is to develop these tests so that you can develop faster. And what it does is remove the tedious work of building these test cases outside of the development environment that you're working within. Yeah. So it's worthwhile to say the 3 steps that you do in there is that you look first to build the test flows. You use the generic components from MUnit to build the Mule components for the test flows, and then you execute those test flows against the Mule runtime and get the reports. So with that, you can look at a use case that we ran against with one of our specific clients, and the whole reason for building MUnit into the IDE, into the Studio IDE, is there to make sure that we get the speed in development. And so one comparison that we've done with one of our financial services customers was able to prove that having everything all in the one place, so that you didn't have to spend time, as we say sometimes, integrating the integration. Yeah, we were able to compare the time that they spent on every single one of their software development phases using MuleSoft, using the other integration approach and the other integration product. And what we saw in unit testing in particular is that they cut their time roughly by 50%. The use cases that we measured them were using fixed message processing, and those not in the industry. FIX stands for Financial Information Exchange, and just a specific it's just a specific protocol that gets used. So with all of the phases, you can see that from a unit testing perspective, a big cut down in the hours that are required to actually make sure that what we have built should be actually going into production. So what is it? And so that's what it is. But the next question is, what's new in MUnit, and what is this responding to in terms of the overall feedback that we've had from the MuleSoft existing MUnit product and MUnit capabilities within Studio? Well, the answer to that is pretty simple. The pain of testing today is speed. It's not fast. It's tedious to get in there. And so the comments that we were responding to when we wanted to come up with this new way of approaching developing these tests is to say unit tests are hard. They're hard to write, they're hard to read, and they're super hard to understand if you haven't been part of building the API. And so we wanted to address that specifically in the new capabilities that we've got within MUnit. So to that, how do we make writing tests much easier? And the answer to that is by introducing what we now have, which is the test recorder. The MUnit test recorder helps by listening to the execution of a flow, recording a sample request and response, and generating the MUnit tests automatically. I'd like to say it really is magic. Maybe it will feel like magic to those who have used the earlier versions of MUnit and have had to write these test cases yourselves. But let's take a look at exactly what it's doing. It is GA. It's been released, and these materials are now freely available for you to download from. If you have access to Studio and the executable for Studio, you can get this to update your Studio environment and get the materials and utilize it. But what it does is automatically write the MUnit test based on the execution of a flow. Yeah. The other thing is it takes the setting of the input and output events for the unit and integration tests to build the MUnit tests. Yeah, so basically, if you set your flows up correctly and you run an execution of that flow, the recorder listens to the way that you've done it and records that as one of the tests that you're going to store against the or with the API that you've built. Now, there's some documentation specifically around this that makes it possible for you to get your hands on it, understand how to use it and how to work with it. There's the developer tutorial, and that is, as I say, that's a hands-on exercise to take you through the new capabilities. And the targeted documentation that's available there is are these specific examples and best practices around how to set your flows up so that the recorder really will cover all of the cases that you're looking to cover as part of the test suite that you're actually building. Anypoint Studio 7.5 and 4.3, it's just one of the, so the new MUnit recording feature is just one of the new features that is contained in Studio 7.5. So if you're not on the latest version of Studio, which, you know, I know we were just working with some guys who are still back on 7.3 and between 7.3 and 7.4. Get to 7.5, get to this, get to the latest download. It really has a lot of the new benefits that have been built in recent times in the development exercises around improving Studio to help improve developer productivity and get you delivering things faster. It's really there for, as the slide says, to automate the creation of the tests and capture the flows as they're executing, record those and hold those as the unit tests against the API that you've created. It allows you to scale with confidence, of course, because now we have significant benefits in the performance of the Mule 4 runtime, bringing it right back onto parity with the throughputs and capability, the throughputs that we used to be able to achieve on Mule 3. And then, of course, we really want to be able to focus also in the new version of Studio, this collaboration around the API specifications. So this need within the development cycle to update the specification and have that part of the iterative process of developing the APIs as you go through that development cycle. That's one of the new capabilities that's been brought into the new release of Studio. So with that, where to go next? The answer is download Studio 7.5. That will bring you access to Mule 4.3, the new runtimes, and the new test recorder, the MUnit recorder, and that capability to record your unit tests. There is a big event coming up, and it is a virtual event. So if you're not signed up for the virtual event, feel free to do so. That is the Developer Meetup at Connect. So that's going to be a big virtual event being run out of Sydney, out of Australia, but that's on June 25th. And of course, documentation, tutorials, all of those things, all of the good stuff that you need to access to get your hands on these new capabilities are at developer.mulesoft.com. So with that, are there any questions about the new MUnit piece or that before we move into the second part of the conversation, which is around building the business case for integration? Wendy, I can't actually see, because I'm presenting, I can't actually see if there are any questions in the...
So we do have a couple, Greg, which I'm just reading through. So hi, I'm reading one from Nalina. So the question is, so hi, I'm new to MuleSoft. So good to see you joining. But has experience Nalina, sorry, has experience on other products. So given each customer business case is different, how do we ensure all possible scenarios are captured? Do we need to build MUnit based on each customer, or is it a standard for all? Sorry, just not relevant subject, just curious. So I guess it's around, how do we cover multiple scenarios? Is it, I guess, dynamic enough to also look at different permutations maybe as well? What's your view on that, Greg?
Well, so what's important to say is that it comes back to the API that you're going to build. Yeah. Now, there are some APIs that will be generic. They're already in Anypoint Exchange that you'll download, and they'll come with a series of tests that you utilize. But on each individual project, as you go through and people tailor the out-of-the-box APIs, they then build their own APIs, they then and go through the process of meeting the requirements of the business case that they're actually focused on, what you'll see is that each one of those APIs will end up with a number of flows and will end up with a number of paths that you can go through those flows. So what MUnit and what the recorder is doing is enabling you to take a unit testing approach that says, let me run the flow with this scenario, with the next scenario, with the next scenario, to fulfill all of the different branches, all of the different approaches that you can take through the flow. And that way, you then end up with a suite of unit tests that actually say, if I ran this entire suite of tests against this particular API, then I know that it's working functionally the way that we want. And I think to answer your question, the answer is that you're going to do that by each API and by each asset that you develop, so that they can truly be lifted and deployed wherever they need to be deployed. Once you've built the functionality and the unit tests that go with them.
Okay, that's good to know. And just to maybe, because I think probably from maybe it's the way I explained it, so apologies. It's also just to understand from Nalina's question. I think MUnit itself is a standard capability which comes with the MuleSoft platform. And then obviously you then build the tests, as Greg's rightly said, per API and et cetera, et cetera. So when maybe if you're working, by sounds of it, you might be working on service side for an SI or something. So essentially, yeah, you would build up specific use cases per customer per API. But the process of doing so is very standard, and as Greg's outlined, it leverages the underlying core capability, which has always been present in MuleSoft, or at least in later versions of MuleSoft, and now has this enhanced feature around how we, how to, I guess, automate and build, automate the definition and the building of those tests. Okay. So thank you for the question. And then just coming on to, sorry, Omse, apologies if I've mispronounced your question. I think Greg's partly answered this, but let's for clarity. So the question is, Greg, does this also cover error type test cases? So clearly, obviously we have positive test cases, and that's all good. But can the recorder also generate all the exception side of things, which can often be, again, equally as mentally time consuming to cover off?
Absolutely, and I think the other standard capability to talk about there, Julian, is to say when you build an API in Mule builds the scaffolding for you. Oh, is that me?
Sounds like it, Greg. Yeah.
Just one moment. That's still a problem, isn't it? It's still a problem, isn't it? Just one moment. Just one minute.
Apologies, everyone. Whilst Greg,
can you hear me now?
Can hear you. A little bit fainter, but we can hear you, and it's clear.
Oh, I can fix that. I can make myself less faint.
You're back. Welcome back.
Sorry about that. So back to the question: error cases. Yes. So the straight answer is yes. But I think it's worthwhile to mention that when you build an API with MuleSoft in Studio, it builds the scaffolding for you. So when it builds that scaffolding, it puts the standardized error handling and components already into the API for you, so that when you want to build those test cases, which of course you're going to need to, it's going to help you there because the error handling is already built into the API.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And then another question from John, and I kind of had a little bit of a similar question, so I'll maybe bundle it together. So we've kind of said that it's available in Studio 7.5 and Mule 3. So I guess the question from John is around, is it possible to update directly from, directly from 7.5 from 7.4? Is that possible to do, or do we have to go elsewhere and incremental updates?
I believe that update is comes down. You know how Studio does its downloads and updates itself?
Yeah.
I believe that it's one of those updates.
Okay, great. And then just the question, which was more what I had, is I guess it's not the 7.5 Studio directly tied into Mule 4.3, or is it separate? So I can, and is there any linkage on the MUnit update into the Mule 4.3 platform? So can I use it 7.5 with other Mule runtimes?
I would so I haven't actually tried it yet, but I would expect, like all of the Studio versions, you can always work on earlier versions of the Mule runtime. But if you want to use Mule 4.3, then you need to be on 7.5.
Sure.
That's what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Is there any other questions from the group around MUnit testing and the changes that have come? I'll give that a minute to come through. Is there and then Greg, have you got any advice and tips around? We've already touched upon it. So MUnit testing and then including that in the capability around CI/CD. I mean, we do it a lot with our customers, and we see so much value add and time by using CI/CD as a developmental process and capability. It just saves a lot of time, right, on builds and testing and deployment. Have you got any, not to go into the whole CI/CD thing, but is there any tips around, including MUnit within that process, if that makes sense? Is it easy to do, hard, difficult?
Well, so it's been designed so that the unit tests can go with the artifacts that you want to put into your pipeline. So, in that sense, it's I think that's what you want, actually, from a productivity perspective. You want to make it such that you can always take the tests that you've written, have them as part of the artifact, and then have them deployed through the pipelines that you have. And I suppose the tip is make sure that when you write your flows and that you write your examples and test cases within that you just run them, and that once you have them and they're part of the artifact, that they really become a useful part of your overall deployment strategy.
Okay. Very good. And then no more questions, but I'll throw this. Sorry, I'm full of questions. And what's there's a stat I think that I'd seen above in one of the earlier slides around test coverage. What kind of percentage test coverage do you think development teams should be trying to achieve with MUnit?
Yeah. So look. That it does vary it varies by both customer and industry. You'll find some industries are more particular about the level of coverage, but somewhere between 60 to 80% seems to be the metrics that people have. And I realize that's quite a broad scope, but if you're in highly sensitive data, then they're expecting 80-85% in terms of coverage for all of the test cases. But if it's in not such a sensitive place, and and things are moving fairly quickly, then you don't need quite the same level of coverage. Okay,
cool. And probably, last question actually, which I did miss from up above. Apologies, Nicholas. One, is there a sample demo? So you've spoken kind of at some length around it, and it all sounds brilliant. Is there I'm sure it's not complicated, but is there a sample demo which comes with the download? Is there somewhere which people can go see it, or is it going to be exclusively at the Connect event?
I don't know if it comes with the demo, but there is a sample demo. It's actually part of the customer. It's something actually that I could share to this group after the event. It comes as part of the customer-facing roadmap presentation that was done just a few weeks back.
Okay.
And there's a nice demonstration of it.
Okay, great. So what I suggest is what we can do is, and then to everybody in the group, and there was a question that came up earlier around just sharing the video of this session, but also sharing the slides. So what we'll do is maybe on this slide, which you see here, Greg, if you could just add the link into this slide after the event, that'd be great. And then as per usual, we'll package up these slides and they'll be made available via the Meetup site. And also just as an outbound email will come for those who've attended, etc. And we'll have the link to where that PDF is and that download on the site, so you can easily get it. So expect that maybe in your inbox late to this, well, tomorrow, that's later this week, or maybe early next week. So keep a lookout for that. But yeah, so if we can just add it into this slide, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll do.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, so topic number 1 done. I think we're just we're just clinging on to time, which is good. I thought we might be cracking through very quickly. So Greg, do you want to move on to building a business case for integration?
Definitely.
I'm scared my name's there. Lead us away.
I think that's actually a good place. That's actually a good place to start, because when we were talking about a potential topic for this meetup, it was to say, what's one of the hardest things to do when you're focused on the technology and you're working really hard to get the right technology in place and take all of the right approaches for doing integration and all of these things. The biggest challenge that I see all of the time is that for all of the well-meaning effort that you put in, you go to talk to somebody from the business side, or someone who actually might be, providing the budget for this particular business case, and they'll turn around and they'll say, it's just a project cost. We don't care. Just get us a cheap one. For all of the effort that you do. So one of the things that becomes important about this topic is to say, we all live in this world where we are developing components and we're working on a way to actually communicate the value of integration. But how do we do that? And how do we do it successfully, I suppose? And that's where this particular topic came from. And I suppose a good place to start is to say, when I'm talking about integration, what is this thing that you might refer to as the language of money? And I suppose that's the first question to you, Julian, and for us to discuss, is to say, what is this language of money, and how do you find it? If you're in a business, how are you going to attach business meaning to what it is that we can do within integration? Did you want to kick off?
throw the ball to me. Yeah, look, I think it's and like I said, this has been a topic which has come up in a number of meetups, and I'm really glad actually that we've got to a point where we can hopefully discuss and cover off a number of people's questions. I think first and foremost, so my experience, okay, and Greg, we're equally as lacking here, so showing a little bit of our age. I mean, when I started in integration, when I started in integration, integration is really transparent, and a little bit today it is. Okay, so integration to a business user or to the end customer of whatever this is, it's completely transparent and should be, and if it works well, etc. And I'm sure everybody knows on this in this forum that we have today that the only ever time real integration gets talked about is when there's an issue, right? When something's not working, and and so therefore something which is really transparent to the business. When you then start to talk around investment in technology, it becomes pretty difficult, right? And from what I found is, it's really hard. It's quite a hard subject to broach. I think where we are slightly now, okay, when we're now talking more in APIs, and when we're talking around connectivity, and we're talking around what that connectivity is used for, and very much so, when we're talking around the economy of mobile apps and connected things, whether it be headless commerce and omni-channel. Actually, there's a lot more easier ways now that I find to talk to people, and I would normally talk around, having come from an architecture background as well, around capabilities, and so for me that's always been a first place to start. Part of that, and when we talk around money, it's when you talk to people around technology and money, it's always, like you said, it's always like, investing in IT again. Whereas now I think it's very much about investing in the business.
Yes, I agree. I think that there's actually something that sits behind this as well, and that is that I think that I think for a long time in the IT space, we have known that we needed to work more closely with business. Yeah, but every time we went to work more closely with business would come back and say, basically, we don't think we need to work that much. You're a supporting function to us. Yeah, we are the business. Whereas I think what's changing, and it's certainly been changing in the last 3 to 4 years, is this realization that actually business now looks to IT to provide them with the platform upon which business happens. And that's quite different to being just a supporting function. And when that realization happens, that's when you see business wanting to work more closely with IT. And then, of course, we have to bridge that gap of what are we talking about when we say we have to use the language of money so that the business actually understands what we're talking about too. And that's where some examples of using the language of money, that's why we use business metrics and KPIs to actually reference what it is that we're doing in integration and what we're going to be able to move in terms of making an improvement to the business. We have to be able to express it in terms of things that make sense for the business. I'll give you a classic example. You work in a telco. Every telco knows that there are probably 4 big metrics that they're interested in. The first is network operating cost. How much does it cost to run the network? Is what you're doing in terms of integration going to help me with that cost? Another classic one is the average revenue per user or per subscriber. Yeah, so how is what we're doing from either a customer-facing project or a customer-facing business case, how is that going to impact that particular ratio? And once we start expressing the importance of integration to those business metrics, that's when we actually link ourselves to business strategy, and we can highlight industry challenges and insights. And it really does speak to why it's important for the business to actually to understand it. I suppose I have one other part in this early stage of this conversation around the language of money, Julian, and that is, what do you think the perception normally of integration is? As you said, it's quite transparent to the business. Why do you think it's important that we really adopt this business language?
Yeah, I think apologies, I probably jumped the gun a little bit. In my other question, which is, look, I think historically integration has clearly been, like I say, transparent, right? No one really sees it, and to some extent, a little bit still today. Okay, yeah. But I conceptualize it slightly as horizontal integration within the enterprise, and then vertical integration, from whether that be end customer down and through to your partner channels. And like I say, there's a lot more prominence and dare I say, around the cliche around digital transformation. For me, it's like I say, it's becoming an integral part of everything which people are doing. And when I use this concept of connectivity, You know, when people are using, like I said, mobile apps, or they're trying to integrate third parties in into their ecosystem, let's say, of their product portfolio, which they're then trying to sell, which is becoming more and more the digital economy. Okay, so for me, it does come back to materially around connectivity and partnership, and obviously, clearly, the easiest way to do that is not manual processes and things which are going to take a long time. Everything is now about speed. Okay, speed, automation, and that then starts to come why it becomes important, and breaking down, like say, perceptions of well, oh yeah, it's just a supporting act to I don't know, to an e-commerce platform implementation, or an OSS implementation, or CRM implementation. You know, fundamentally now it's becoming a core thing, right? Connecting one or more things together, especially also just around, you know, people's technology roadmaps and the I guess the proliferation maybe of applications within your enterprise and past the enterprise. So, you know, it's like I say, so it's talking into that, and maybe just coming back to your point around business strategy. I mean, when I, you know, moving from, I used to do a lot of architecture work, enterprise architecture work, working with CIOs and things. And then from my perspective, and, you know, when we talk around business strategy and KPIs, etc., you know, people normally have at the very top line actually a number of key things, and it's probably around, especially now, it's either growth or optimization, i.e., some level of cost saving. Okay, and I think bringing it down into that, that's what basically people want to know. So where does it align? Where does it align into that, into each of those strategic objectives? And then materially, where do those capabilities fit across the organization? So, you know, again, whether it be marketing or operations or the retail side of things, and really plugging into that. And, you know, we'll probably come on to it in a little bit. But again, you know, my experience, you talked about telco, but, you know, retail, again, it's, you know, cost to serve, right? How can I improve my cost to serve? And that's, if you can start to show marginal gains by using speed of technology, speed to market, bring on a new channel could be, which requires, you know, connectivity, you know, a new mobile app, which require maybe, you know, an API gateway or a back-end integration. You know, when you think around, you know, for a large retailer, you know, you're talking around, you know, tens, hundreds of thousands, which will be taken, you know, of dollars taken via that channel. You can't achieve that without having, you know, a technology like MuleSoft. So that's when it becomes, you start to hear that material, you know, the ears of the business start to prick up.
Yeah. No, look, I think I think it's that when you start talking about marginal things, particularly for our online businesses, that's, you know, a marginal thing actually can mean a big amount of money for the business. And I think that's the big realization actually that's coming from the business side now, that because IT is providing the platform, therefore those things that were margins that they used to work on, that they felt they were the only ones who worked on, the truth is that the platform now can deliver those kind of marginal benefits as well, and that can mean a big difference to the you know, to the overall success of the business, or the overall, you know, the overall profitability, or you know, the dollars and cents within the business. And
Sure.
I suppose
Yeah.
dollars and cents comes down to, well, what is the value of the value of integration? And you know, so you can start this part of the conversation as well around what is it and how do you find it. There are lots of metrics that go out there that allow you to say, well, this is how you're going to get this kind of ROI. But in your experience, how hard is it, or how easy is it to actually build that kind of ROI case?
I think it can be quite difficult. Sorry, I'm just thinking. I mean, from things we worked on. I mean, yeah, building business cases is can be always challenging, and it comes back to, you know, people trying to make comparisons as well. So, well, how much is it per transaction, and how much is it per this, and so on and so forth. So, finding a, you know, a core set of metrics, let's say, that you would build a standard business case on, maybe, whether it be an investment in some assets, so typically the CFO wants to see some of this, right? So he or she shouldn't be predictive on that, but the CFO would want to see, they would have a standard model, and actually some of these things don't fit nicely into that. So your point here around depends on the use case. I totally agree, but I think it's, like I say, I think it's coming back to there are key indicators that the platform and the technology can bring, right?
Sure.
And maybe we'll come on to some of those in the short time as well. And you may need to take one or more of those and fit them into what you're trying to go for money for, and against what you're trying to do.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, I just made a comment underneath this that yes, it depends on the use case, but for me, in integration, one of the fundamental things is that if you look back over the last 35 years doing integration, and I'm going to put my hand up and say I haven't done 35 years, but okay, probably closer than that to zero. The truth is, what we do in integration actually hasn't changed that much. We still connect things. We still have connectors. We still have protocols that we have to work through. We still have data mapping. We still have transformations. We still have to do that. Yes, we've changed in some of the eventing approaches. Yes, we've changed, and all of this stuff has happened. But actually, what's really changing is the how and the why that actually makes the difference. And so I think when we look towards deriving what the value of integration is, you should really look at not just what the integration brings from a project perspective, and okay, this project contributes this kind of ROI, but actually what capability does the way that you do the integration bring to the business? And that's actually sometimes a little bit harder to measure on the first project, but it's absolutely measurable on the second and the third and the fourth and every subsequent project. So I've got just a couple of examples here. I always end up focusing back on practical measures when it comes to looking towards the value of integration and the way that you're approaching that integration. If you have a platform, if the information is in one place, guess what? It makes finding the problem that much easier, particularly if you're getting visibility over what's happening within all of the APIs rather than just a particular set of them, and then you have to go and find in the other environments where you go and find that. So that reduces the amount of time that it takes you to repair if something does break. Absolutely, you mentioned speed to market, and that's always one of the key measures, that if you've got a new idea and you don't have to rebuild everything, then the answer is you know that you can get to the market faster. One of the areas that I'm seeing increasingly as well is this whole area around security. The truth is these days that because everything is much more connected, that a security breach has the potential to actually expose a lot more data. And let's face it, there are malicious actors or people who are far more motivated these days to actually see if they can break the security. And I think that piece absolutely speaks to business being online or organizations needing to be online, sharing sensitive information and building that trust with customers. That's absolutely something that you can quantify in terms of people's interactions with the systems and things that you build. Infrastructure optimization, I think, also is one of the other areas. When you have the ability to just pick up assets and deploy them somewhere else, that makes your life a whole lot easier when it comes to optimizing what it is that you're using under the covers. So
yeah, I think all of those are really good, for sure. I think around maybe just a couple of other thoughts, next extension of some of these, for speed to market, for sure, bringing on new channels and reusing APIs across different space. I mean that's a kind of a classic space. The other point around just on that is also agility and dynamicism, right? So I don't know if people have worked with agencies and application front end developers and the way that now product owners are working in very agile ways. bringing something for an MVP first to market is clearly people want to do that. But it's also then how quickly you can iterate through that. Okay, and so actually the mean time also to bring new changes to market it should clearly be understood, and a kind of mean time to evolve, I guess, is what I'm partly saying around that. So that's a good one. And you talked around security, and risk is clearly massive. Having a pre-packaged technology, that's been out in the market, tried and tested, is for sure a cost saving that you should be, or sorry, an investment you should be looking at, rather than looking for a cost saving over maybe a homegrown solution which has not been out in the market, for example, and has not been tried and tested, and is not going to be necessarily kept up to date with all the various security holes which people are trying to leverage. Okay, so because as soon as you go online, people will try to get into you, right? That's for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and the minute you as an organization do anything that makes you stick your neck out a little bit, that's absolutely when people have a go. So, and I think that relates to the other component, which is one of the challenges that you always have is, how do I compare costs? There are the typical considerations. There is the approach to licensing. Is it a subscription? Is it a one-off, perpetual license? What is the license cost? This is what we're trying to achieve. What's it going to look like? How much does it cost to implement it? And how much does it cost to train my people? I think they're the typical ones. Are there any others that you see when people start comparing costs that are the typical considerations?
I guess, everyone talks around cost of ownership and TCO and stuff. I think so what you do have is here is classic. I think adding into some of this is clearly when people are moving towards cloud, and I think an infrastructure and everything, and an operational management. There's also kind of a misconception around, because we've got very flexible technologies when we look at AWS and all these alike, and everything which sits on top, and it's very much a very pure pay-as-you-go thing. So, and again, I think it's a challenge back into CFOs and businesses alike, and there's also an aspect of OPEX versus CAPEX. So that's capital investment versus operational investment, and where people can clearly, CFOs like to, what we say, amortize, assets essentially, which they can historically have done with on-premise kind of deployments, and cloud obviously over the last few years has started to challenge that model, I guess. So that's probably another typical consideration I'd be looking to put in there.
Yeah, indeed. On the often missed side, I've listed a few here because I keep bumping my head up against them all of the time. One is the additional licenses as more capacity is required, which is always around the challenge of saying, well, we can go in with something that's cheap and cheerful to begin with, but once you start getting down to the details of, actually, I need to add more capacity, I need to be more robust, I need to be or more resilient, I need HA, now I need to do these things, then all of a sudden the licensing costs really can start to go beyond the initial scope of what you thought was going to be your commitment towards an integration platform. And I think that's one of the things to make sure you don't miss. And then there are a number of you might think of them as kind of softer or less easily defined, but I think they're actually quite well defined costs that you can put in there. Developer productivity. It's one thing to say, I've got this tool that can do this particular kind of integration really, really quickly, and that's great. But unfortunately, you have only a group of people who know how to do it, and then you miss out on all of the other productivity as they need to work with operations, they need to work with the business analysts, they need to work with all of the other components. So it's you should take a holistic view around that. Increased maintenance overhead. Sometimes you end up spending a lot of time integrating the integration. for want of an easier way of saying it, And then architecture lock-in. This is one that I see quite a bit of when people love a kind of architecture, and I'm particularly referring here to I just need a gateway. All I need is a gateway. And you say, well, that's great, but have you thought about zero trust security? Have you thought about what this is going to look like in 2-3 years time, when gateways and SOA and that whole architectural approach is, it's at least 20 odd years old now. So, is that really going to serve what the business needs? And perhaps that's the question that needs to be covered.
Yeah, I think another couple of other things I'd add in is it's also classically now around skills in the market as well. I think when we a lot of the big challenge where organizations are today, especially when we talk around legacy modernization, and I know at least 3 customers presently where they've got legacy technologies, and hey, it's been kind of evolved over the last 10, maybe even longer in some of the banks, 15, 20 years, and the maintenance of those are a few guys who have been with the business, maybe in a contract perspective as well, really quite expensive, but they're the only people who know about this, and they have the very niche skills in maintaining these, and so clearly now you need to think around the skills that are going to be used, common skills, very much standards-based skills in the market, to add into this, and how much it is on that side of things. And I'm just trying to think of another one. I had it in my mind, but it's clearly, those are clearly key things to think around. You've got conscious of time as well, Greg. We should up the pace.
Okay. Well, so actually, I think if you're comfortable with all of those topics, there's one thing that we can actually help you with from a MuleSoft perspective within this MuleSoft community, and that is that we have what is referred to as a self-serve collaborative value assessment. Now, I haven't got all of it in here for today, but what I just really wanted to show everyone was the fact that these topics are absolutely crucial to the success of setting up the projects the right way, and the conversations to get the funding and get the value for integration that is important to get your project set up the right way. So with that, the self-serve collaborative value assessment, and I'll just introduce it to you very, very quickly. It really focuses the output that it focuses upon are really 3 things. The first thing is it looks at something that we call here, and this is just a sample, to say business outcomes delivered. And you can see that there's a structure in the way that we do this. Business objectives, what's the business objective that we're trying to map to? What are the initiatives that we're working against? What are the technology use cases that we're looking to deliver? And what's the value that particular initiative or those use cases is going to bring to the business? So you can see there's a structured way there's a structured way to discuss what those business outcomes are going to be. The second piece to this is to then talk about the challenges in the process that are being overcome using a MuleSoft approach. Yeah, so here you have integration tech. You can see the area, the observation, and the implication. But it's to say there's a way of expressing this is the component, like API strategy. The observation is you might not have one, or you don't have a coherent one at this point in time. But what that means for the business, and being able to express that to the business, is to say the lack of alignment between business and IT drives up the cost of actually delivering these projects for the business. Yeah, so you can see there are a number of examples here that we can go through, but are provided for you in this self-serve assessment. And then the last component is to actually say, how do we read this out? How do we actually present this to the business in a format that they can actually say, we understand the dollars and we understand how you got there. And that's what this whole piece around the value realized section of the value assessment comes into. And what it allows you to specify is the estimated costs without taking the MuleSoft approach, and then, of course, the actual costs that are going to be incurred using it with doing it with MuleSoft. And so it's a tool that gives you a series of questionnaires and series of data points upon which you can then use benchmarks to decide whether your organization is this way or that way compared to the benchmark. For example, one of the benchmarks is going to be how many back-end systems do you need to connect in your environment. Some organizations haven't got very many. Some organizations have got lots and lots. And so therefore, by using the benchmarks are your friend in that environment. You can utilize the benchmarks to actually use the tool to come up with a number that you can actually support, as opposed to just being something that we, MuleSoft as a vendor, have derived for you. So that's what the value assessment is. That's the thing that we wanted to. That's the thing that I wanted to share with you as the capstone to this whole discussion around how do we help build a business case for integration. All of those topics that we talked about beforehand absolutely make sense. But when it comes down to how do I put it into a format that the business is going to understand, there's a tool that's available for you. And if you want it and you want to use it, just reach out to us and we can help you with it. So with that, other things, upcoming.
Just hold on there, Greg. Any questions from the? Sorry, we've Greg and I realised we've kind of waffled on maybe for the last 25 minutes, but I hope it's been of use. I see there's a few comments and people say it has been of use. But is there any questions from the group? Other than where can we get this? which is well this will be, so to answer some of those questions, this will be shared, and what Greg and I can also facilitate is sharing the tools and the and also the value assessment piece. I guess probably one question maybe I'm going to throw to you, Greg, and just to, so probably one is just around where do you go for money, I guess, and how do you look at finance budgets? And I mean, from what I've seen is sometimes it's difficult, especially now where people's budgets are sitting and so on and so forth. What typically do you see is where is the money sitting today? Let's say, where can you go looking for the money? You got the value case, you got the business case. Where is it that you need to go looking?
Once again, it's going to be driven by the kind of use cases that you're looking to support. That'll be the first thing. But what we see in the market is that this whole actually COVID has actually pushed this really to the forefront, and that is this whole concept of two things. One is the connected experience. So if you're looking at that, then the answer is whoever owns the budget for driving that kind of interaction that provides the connected experience for the people for interacting with the organization. That's going to be one place where the budget is. And the other place that we actually have started to see quite a lot of momentum around actually comes from a statistic, and that is that in 2017, IBM came up with the bold claim that has actually been verified time and time again, that 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years, and on an exponential scale. So in other words, it's getting bigger. And that's really true. So you can say now that we're in 2020, it is true that greater than 90% of the world's data that's accessible, that's about consumers and about behaviors and all of those sorts of things, has been created in the last 2 years. And the other component of that is that it's outside of the core systems that we work with. It's in all of the interactions, it's in what we did on the website and everything else. So the smart organizations are realizing that the organization that can harness that data, which means they've got to be able to connect to it, they've got to be able to consume it, make it meaningful in their world. The organizations that can harness that data for better insights and then drive different experiences for their consumers, for the people interacting with them, that's where the money's going.
Sure, yeah, and I would concur on that. And I think what has been classic use cases right around integration, which is connecting one system to the other, your e-commerce to your ERP and to your supply chain, or some of your finance and systems into X, Y, and Z and OSS and etc. and telco. Actually, and that's what pretty much everyone's focus around integration has been, and unknowingly then, and that's where really people in the enterprise still keep their head. I think what I'd encourage, everyone at community, independent on what roles, etc. But evangelize. If you're in control of your integration teams and development, etc., and you're in there, really go out and inquire with the business. What business initiatives are you doing? Are you doing BI and data science is a classic one. And I was talking with yesterday with a client around data science, and data, to do data science, you typically require multiple sources of data, and that actually just doesn't come from also within your enterprise. That's not just tapping into classic data warehouse stuff. You're actually now looking at more other sources of data, and from third parties, whether it be from I was using examples around getting in brand watch and Google search data, and third-party industry stats and all these types of things, and that requires connectivity and APIs and stuff. So, so what were the classic use cases? There are so many more out there. That, like I say, if you're looking to push integration projects and using APIs, let's say, you probably need to look out into the broader business programs and things that are being used, and that then really starts to drive adoption. And so, it's part as I know as architects, I would always recommend to my team and etc. A good architect is not just around being able to technically design stuff. It's also about to go and inquire and be inquisitive around the business, engage the business. You have to convince and lobby, right, and influence those people around the best things, and this is all part of that. So I think there was a question as well. So are you so keen on specific industry when you talk around data and connectivity? No, I mean, I think in to cover that, I think connectivity and digital is now touching everywhere, and from every industry I see now. Like I know we've got people here from telcos, from retail, from medical and healthcare for sure. When you think around again devices which you're connected into, your Apple Watches and stuff, and anyway into education and who's the end the end customer. Educational experiences are changing now and everything. So connectivity and data is everyone is talking around the same capabilities and things. And I think, like I said, I think everyone's challenged by similar things. So they might have some industry specifics, but there are definitely common themes which we talk around. Okay. Very good. Any more questions? So we've still got a good attendance. So, but let's. I'm conscious it's 20 past 5. So, Greg, should we info on upcoming events?
We should info the upcoming events. Yes. What we have is that the presentation. So we've got Sydney. We've got the Connect coming up in Sydney again this year. Last year, you can see all of the presentations from Connect are actually stored out there. But last year, Sydney had the largest Connect for Developer Connect. The Developer Meetup was the largest at Connect last year for the one that we had in Sydney. And at that, we had 54 people certified at or off the back of that particular event. So it's a really good place to get your head into all of the latest and greatest things that are coming from a MuleSoft perspective. So they say save the date. Connect 2020 is at the end of June, and and so it will be a very, very big event, and particularly from a developer meetup perspective, we really encourage everybody to get involved and leverage the information that's going to be available there.
So I guess anomaly on this slide, Greg, probably needs to update it. I hadn't seen that, sorry. So to answer your question, Paul, so Connect is virtual, it's digital this year.
Yeah.
It is on the 25th of June, I believe. So, and it's, I believe it's something like maybe 10 a.m., maybe I can't remember, maybe it's 10 a.m. Australian time. So which will be, I guess, those in Singapore, that's 8 a.m. And I think it's pretty much I'm sure it goes through to 1 p.m. I think. So it's, so it will be it'll be a good session. I think there's a few keynote sessions. There'll be a number of breakout sessions as well. So there'll be, you can go out into virtual breakout sessions. And so it's they've already, excuse me, they've already run one in the Americas. So that's been done. EMEA may have just been done, I believe, or is about to be done. And then, like I say, so APAC will be on the 25th of June. So we'll add that in as well. So we'll sign up is registration. I know in the America one, I think they went out of, or they sold out, quote unquote, of available slots. So I know it is still available to register for. So please, if you get the time, please go on and do that ASAP. If you go onto the MuleSoft website, etc., and we'll also include it in this pack as well. And with the email, we'll include the registration for that as well. Okay. Just a few other things before we move out. I mean, I really do encourage you. There's so much content. There's so much webinars and etc., which is going on and been produced by MuleSoft over the last 2 months, given the current situation. So there's really a lot to engage with, especially I guess from an industry perspective. There's been a number of webinars, so do look at that. For those of you who didn't see it, there was the announcement around 4.3, and maybe we'll come on to that as a competition in a minute. So there's a number of, if you haven't done, go and check out the new features. Go check out the new features that are available. And so that's on that, which is, there's some really neat stuff, which the MuleSoft product team are coming with. So that's really good. And I'm just trying to think what else. There's a really good webinar session for Singapore around that was last week, which I quite enjoyed, which was the banking one and the implication of the new digital banking licenses which are coming to Singapore, and also the impact of that also into wider Asia. So that, I believe, is probably it on announcements. If I think of anything else, we'll add it in as well. Okay, great. Move on.
Okay, I'm trying.
Are you stuck?
Yeah, just one moment.
Oh, are you trying to write a question for your competition?
I have a competition that has been prepared for us.
Uh-huh.
I think I've been given the wrong password. We might have to come back to this one. I'm sorry, because unless I can't read correctly. One last try.
One last try, and then I'll do an ad hoc competition if we can't do it.
No, I'm not being allowed to log in. So.
Oh no, there you go.
Yeah. Sorry.
Persona non grata. Never mind. So maybe if so normally what we do in our meetups, we normally we can give away a couple of certification vouchers to those lucky winners of maybe a question, and I'm gonna come up with something creative, which we did have prepared. But with that said, so as I just said, and this is going to test everybody's close proximity to MuleSoft and how well you know MuleSoft. So we saw one new feature, okay, from the new 4.3 platform and the tooling. Let's say we're going to have three first correct answers, and that might be I'll try and do as best as we can. Oh no, so not MUnit. So anything other than MUnit. So in 4.3, there were a number of new features announced. Can anybody name me a new feature? Wow, brilliant. God, okay. Whoa. Lots. Gee, okay, very good. Okay, I'm gonna read some of these out. If anyone comes with a new one. Okay, definitely. So some from the top of the list. So yeah, there's new stuff around service mesh, and I think that's quite exciting. So I'm probably not as technical wizard around all the brand new features around service mesh and what's going on in the industry around it. But from my simplistic way, being able to see and connect and bring under one operational perspective, everything around APIs, which are going, both in your MuleSoft space and also across your organization that you may not have developed on MuleSoft, which MuleSoft is quite, I think, forthcoming in appreciating that fact. People are doing other microservice architecture and stuff, so I think that's a really powerful tool. And what you get from the MuleSoft platform in terms of monitoring and capability, is actually being praised a lot in industry. So I think that's a brilliant addition. We've talked around MUnit, so yeah, that's a really good, everyone's got that really good answer. There are other things around so there's API Community Manager as well, which came, which was pseudo released beta back last year, but it's really gone officially GA now. And I think that, in a lot of the things we've discussed actually today is a really good point and links in nicely. So API Community Manager, for me, it's kind of Exchange 2.0 in reality. So whereas, Exchange is very much probably quite static, but it's a good place for developer portal, I guess, to go and get your APIs and to share with business partners and the like. Community Manager really takes it to that next stage, fully branded. You can use based around a lot of Salesforce communities, which is, is a great kind of intranet kind of, engagement platform. And you can start to build and interact with your partner ecosystem. So if you're, if you're in a position where you are not necessarily monetizing, but monetizing in a way, your APIs and expose them to third parties, API Community Manager then helps you interact with those, the developers community outside of your enterprise and help evolve them, release new features and communicate that well. So yeah, there's some really neat stuff in there, which is really good. There's new stuff around data weave, and kind of like Greg alluded to it, and also the performance side of things. So the early versions of 4 was, there were, to be polite, a few compromises, let's say, on some runtime performance at times, and that has been slowly improving. But definitely in 4.3, we've seen, even from our experience in the last few weeks, we've seen some real good improvements in the 4.3 runtime, especially around the handling of data weave components and things like that. Okay. B2B partner, again, if you're working in that partner space, more in that, the classic, I would say, EDI model. There's some really neat features around the partner manager capability. So that's new and that's really good. Who else is on here? So I'm trying to think if I've missed anything. Is there anything I've missed, Greg? Yeah.
No, I think you got all the big ones.
Got all the big ones, yeah. So there are a good few answers in here. So I think we've got this recorded, and so I can definitely see from Alfred. Yeah, good. We'll get you Paul as well. And Raul, you came in at very much the same time. So we'll get these names listed, and then we'll get something out to you. Okay, very good. Is that us? Is that our last topic, Greg?
That was our last thing to do. I've managed to take a picture of the Google Meet, because we can't all get together and take a picture, which is, I think, one of the usual
Exactly.
things to do. And of course, we don't. It's difficult for us to share swag. So what we say at this point is, we see you next time.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess if there's any questions, hopefully it's been a useful session for everybody, and we'll definitely be planning, if it's not physical in Singapore, but we'll also be doing probably virtual. I even had a thought, actually, maybe for Wendy, even when we do our physical ones, we can actually open it up as a virtual one as well, so people can join from other communities across the local region, which might be useful.
Definitely.
Okay, any other questions? We're on 5:30, so actually, amazingly, and this is, I have to say, probably the first time we've kept the time on the Singapore meetup. So any other questions? Any other questions?
Yeah, Julian, there's still one more question on the chat.
Okay.
Yep.
What is the question? Sorry, Wendy. Sorry, I'm missing it.
From Paul.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey guys, check the connect.
You want a beer?
Oh, yeah, the beers. Yeah, exactly. All my colleagues in Australia all have beers on these things as well, whereas Singapore, but normally we do have Singapores. Yeah, in Singapore we have beers, we have pizza, and for those who like the alcohol-free suggestion, we also have other flavors of drinks. Not to be promoting any particular brand. So hopefully we normally run these every 2 to 3 months. We had 4 sessions last year just for everyone, and we'll, like I say, we'll start to get back into a cadence. So maybe in a couple of months' time, we'll try. My ambition will be still to get 4 in this year. It's my own KPI. So let's see if we can achieve that. Like I say, it's been pleasure to have everybody on. It's good to see we had a good turnout as well. So if there's no more questions. And like I said, actually, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop either Greg or myself or the organisers. Also, Wendy, who's done a great job in organising this session as well. So, if you have any questions offline and anything comes to mind, do not hesitate to get in contact with us. Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay, we'll leave the session open just for a few more minutes, and so everyone can dial off. But I'm going to bid you goodbye and wave everyone goodbye. Okay, thank you for turning up.
Thanks for all your help, mate.
All right, cheers.
Wendy, would you like to press stop record now?